From ministers, the saintly persons continued. When the king protects the citizens from the disturbances of mischievous ministers, as well as from thieves and rogues, he can, by virtue of such pious activities, accept taxes given by his subjects. Thus a pious king can certainly enjoy himself in this world, as well as in the life after death. Purport. The duty of a pious king is described very nicely in this verse. His first and foremost duty is to give protection to the citizens from thieves and rogues, as well as from ministers who are no better than thieves and rogues. Formerly, ministers were appointed by the king and were not elected. Consequently, if the king were not very pious or strict, the ministers would become thieves and rogues and exploit the innocent citizens. It is the king's duty to see that there is no increase of thieves and rogues, either in the government secretariat or in the departments of public affairs. If a king cannot give protection to citizens from thieves and rogues, both in the government service and in public affairs, he has no right to exact taxes from them. In other words, the king or the government that taxes can levy taxes from the citizens only if the king or government is able to give protection to the citizens from thieves and rogues. In the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a description of these thieves and rogues in government service. As stated, prajaste bhakshayishyanti malacha rajanya rupina. These proud malechas, persons who are less than Sudras, representing themselves as kings, will tyrannize their subjects, and their subjects, on the other hand, will cultivate the most vicious practices. Thus, practicing evil habits and behaving foolishly, the subjects will be like their rulers. The idea is that in the democratic days of Kali Yuga, the general population will fall down to the standard of Shudras. As stated, Kalau Shudra Sambhava. Practically the whole population of the world will be Shudra. A Shudra is a fourth-class man who is only fit to work for the three higher social castes. Being a fourth-class man, Shudras are not very intelligent. Since the population has fallen in these democratic days, they can only elect a person in their category. But a government cannot run very well when it is run by Shudras. The second class of men, known as Kshatriyas, are especially meant for governing a country under the direction of saintly persons, Brahmanas, who are supposed to be very intelligent. In other ages, in Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, the general populace was not so degraded, and the head of government was never elected. The king was the supreme executive personality, and if he caught any ministers stealing like thieves and rogues, he would at once have them killed or dismissed from service. As it was the duty of the king to kill thieves and rogues, it was similarly his duty to immediately kill dishonest ministers in government service. By such strict vigilance, the king could run the government very well, and the citizens would be happy to have such a king. The conclusion is that unless the king is perfectly able to give protection to rogues, citizens from thieves and rogues, he has no right to levy taxes from the government, from the citizens, for his own sense gratification. However, if he gives all protection to the citizens and levies taxes on them, he can live very happily and peacefully in this life, and at the end of this life, be elevated to the heavenly kingdom or even to the Vaikunthas, where he'll be happy in all respects. Rajana sadvamatjebhyash choradibhya prajanripa rakshanyatabalim vinaniha precha chamodate. The saintly persons continued, when the king protects the citizens from the disturbances of mischievous ministers, as well as from thieves and rogues, he can, by virtue of such pious activities, accept taxes given by his citizens. Thus a pious king can certainly enjoy himself in this world as well as in the life after death. Here in this verse, we have a description of how a material society should run. Material societies are run by kings who require to have sense gratification. They, in fact, cannot go on with their kingdom unless they take up sense gratification. Without sense gratification, the king cannot continue. Therefore, generally, the kings were allowed more than one wife. They had all kinds of society girls in their court. They would engage them in various ways. And they were more or less enjoying very opulent circumstances and conditions in the palace, and were quite happy enjoying sense gratification until it was time to make battle. Then, because of all their motive passion due to sense gratification, they would go out and very ferociously make battle. So all in all, the kings were fueled by sense gratification. Yeah. material society. However, there were exceptions, and those exceptions are Vaishnavas. Those Vaishnavas, like Maharaj Yudhisthira, they did not engage in sense gratification. They did not engage in all these different affairs. Therefore, the people in their state were happy because they were not engaged in sense gratification, but they were engaged in protecting the people. And they acted in a different way. The Vaishnava king acts in a different way than even a pious ordinary king, and both of them act in a very different way than an impious, useless king. The Vaishnava king is kind to everyone, so much so that his power alone, by his potency as a Vaishnava, is sufficient to turn the whole world practically into Vaikuntha. And thus everybody's happy, and they've got what they need, and there's no need for thieves and rogues. But were there to be a thief and rogue, he would immediately act very strongly. For instance, Maharaj Parikshit. No thieves and rogues existed in his kingdom. It was too pure. They couldn't tolerate. And everyone was happy. But when he was on a tour and he saw Kali dressed like a king, the age of Kali personified, beating a cow and bull by the legs, he immediately took out his sword to kill the offender. He said, "What are you? Ho, who are you? Dressed like a king, but I see you are actually fit as a person of the fourth order. Never in my kingdom has there ever been anyone beating a cow or bull, defenseless creatures. Therefore, prepare to meet your death right now, on the spot." And Kali, being intelligent rogue, immediately fell down on the floor and begged forgiveness, and immediately Maharaj Parikshit forgave him. So we can find that the Vaishnava kings didn't have these problems because the people didn't become rogues and thieves in the first place. Whereas in the modern society, the people are trained to be rogues and thieves by their value structure. Their values are materialistic, therefore they become rogues and thieves by that value structure. And the material government cannot change that because they're also rogues and thieves. They're busy stealing from the citizens, and the citizens are busy stealing from each other. All the way down the line, it's a society of thieves. And it must be. Nowadays, in order to survive, you must be tricky. Just like in Russia, they're so busy giving not enough to everybody that one of the greatest curses you can give somebody is, "May you live on your salary." Isn't it? May you live on your salary. The money you get from your salary, may you live on that. That means you will die very soon. Everybody has to be tricky. Black economy, twice as big as the white economy. Why? Because it's arranged that way. Because of the system. Similarly here in Sweden, it's becoming that way very quickly. Everybody giving up all semblance of trying to follow anything, because it's crazy. If the government acts like thieves and rogues, then the people will automatically have to follow, because they have no choice even. They're practically forced by the government to also become thieves. The government is eager to take away all what you've got. Therefore, they have to protect it. It's simple. It's obvious. Therefore, government must be protective, not exploitive. It cannot just steal from people and give them nothing. It must protect people. And then it may take something what it needs. Government needs something, there's no doubt. Factually, interesting point. Although this is not exactly the Krishna consciousness that we generally preach from Srimad Bhagavatam, but we find everywhere in Bhagavatam that the statements about kings are there. Now, although one would generally think this is political, but Srimad Bhagavatam is meant for kings. It actually was spoken to a king, and it was about saintly kings, It's for the topmost people, because if the king is good, if the society is well run, then everybody becomes happy very quickly. And the whole society transforms very quickly. It all depends on the leader. If he's good, then everything's good. If he's bad, everything's bad. That's the nature of life. So, Bhagavatam gives instruction for kings. Grandfather Bhishma, in Mahabharata, one of the most important points when he's instructing Maharaj Yudhisthira, because Maharaj Yudhisthira was a perfect king, and Grandfather Bhishma wanted to give him perfect knowledge. So while he's instructing him, he's always coming to this point of how to extract taxes. He says the king should not extract taxes only in one way. He should do it in many different ways so that people do not feel pain. As soon as the people feel pain from the extraction of taxes, then he will start to get in trouble. Because then they will become thieves by the law in order to protect themselves from that pain. So therefore, my grandfather Bhishma gave all kinds of clever ways. But the government is also meant to protect the people by storing grains, storing ghee. These things can be stored for a long time. In fact, rice, for instance, you can store. The best rice in India is rice which is 11 years old. Yeah, exactly 11 years old. It is yellow. They seal it in barrels for 11 years. And after 11 years, you take that rice. Wow. Very good. Excellent. It gets much better. Yeah? You pay piles of money for 11-year-old rice. Here in the West, they only know how to rot some whiskey or something for 11 years. They would have no idea the art of storing grains. So when the time came, if there was crisis, if the king couldn't feed all the people and couldn't take care of them if they were in trouble, then he was in very much trouble himself. He was considered useless. Even if there was a thief coming in a place and the king could not take care of him, the king was considered useless and rejected by the people. When there was a tiger coming and eating people, formerly there were many tigers. Not only formerly, nowadays also, in Bengal the tigers are eating people again. Somehow they're lurking around in the forest there in southern Bengal. Nobody can stop them. And they're eating people again. So, formerly, the king was to go in the forest with his sword and shield and kill the tiger and drag him back himself. And then when the people saw him dragging back that tiger, they would glorify that king like anything. So, he had to work to get anything. It's not that he just did what he wanted and at the end they gave him everything. No. He had to work for it. And if he didn't do these things, protection, he was rejected. Just like that Brahmana in Dwarka was so much angry on Arjuna because Arjuna could not stop his sons from being kidnapped. All these sons are being, of course they were being stolen by Mahavishnu. That's another thing. Therefore he could not stop them. But the point was like that. No thief or rogue or lion or tiger or anybody should be able to harm the citizens. One should be so careful. One should, in the state, everything should be very properly done. And then the king should protect from outside influence. That's his main job, to protect from outside influences. And his ministers, they were protecting against the inside influences. But if the ministers were also thieves and rogues, everything was finished. When the ministers are thieves and rogues, then everything's finished. Therefore, one had to be careful on two fronts, the external and the internal, to make sure the ministers were also taking care of the people nicely. And when that's not done, everything is very much in trouble. Sometimes in the modern society you have people from being disturbed by the external forces and the internal forces. Again, the ants in the middle of the two sides of the burning log. Kali Yuga is like that. So, actually, the establishment of a proper leader in society is actually part of the business of the Krishna consciousness movement. Not that we want to become that leader. Absolutely not. But We want to establish that personality for the protection of the society. Our business is to establish first-class leadership in the society by giving them instruction by which they will understand how to act. And when they protect the society, then everybody will be very happy. So first-class instruction is required. So Prabhupada wanted to establish a class of brahmanas who could teach. But there must be a king. One first-class personality who can protect people. And when that's there, then Krishna consciousness movement can flourish. We have seen it in different religious traditions. Christianity didn't flourish until Constantine gave them shelter. Of course, Constantine was so much of a malecha, he made them change all their nice principles. Otherwise, he couldn't take care of anything. But when Ashoka, Emperor Ashoka in India, embraced Buddhism, then it spread like anything. Of course, it was kicked out right after that. And when the different kings in different places embraced different philosophies, then they expanded. So the point is that the philosophical concept, the spiritual concept, can take shelter in a saintly king. Otherwise, how will shelter be there? So Prabhupada said 2 programs. We distribute books like anything to inform the people what's going on in spiritual life. And then in democratic system, they elect a nice leader. Or we continuously keep on preaching to the intelligent class of man so that the leaders who are already there can become Krishna conscious. Either way, good enough. Either those who are already there become Krishna conscious or the people elect Krishna conscious leaders. Either way, good enough. Just as long as we can somehow or another get some Krishna consciousness into the management of the society, then it will be much better. If they can just reduce these unlimited sinful activities that the state is sanctioning, then the society will transform little by little. Of course, there are so many reactions still to come. And these leaders have to fall into the lowest conditions because of allowing this to go on. They must share a portion of the sinful reactions of the people. If the people act nicely, the king gets the credit. He shares their pious activities and enjoys like anything. If the people act foolishly, he shares their impious activities and he suffers like anything. Therefore, the king's first duty is to make sure that the people are acting nicely for his own benefit too. In the Vedic culture, it was understood, this linkage. In Western culture, it's not understood. And therefore, when leaders are just suffering, they don't understand why. But in the Vedic culture, the linkage was there. They understood. So therefore, they went out of their way to make sure the people were acting nicely, because then they shared in that pious result. But that's also material. The Vaishnava makes the people into pure devotees by giving all facility to the preachers and arranging the society such that it will go on very spiritually. And he shares in that preaching credit. By arranging for preaching, you get the credit for the preaching. By giving the facilities for others to preach, you also get that credit. So therefore, the Vaishnava kings, always eager to invite the saintly personalities. For instance, when Vidura was out traveling, and he came back after the battle of Kurukshetra, and Dhritarashtra, his brother, was in the palace of Maharaj Yudhisthira, the one he tried to kill. So Vidura was preaching to Maharaj Dhritarashtra, who everybody was calling king just so he wouldn't feel disturbed. How nice the Vedic culture was. Just so Dhritarashtra, the biggest rascal there was, the cause of all of the destruction of all of this dynasty, Kuru dynasty, Maharaj Yudhisthira and family called him, "O King," just so he would feel like he was a king. Although Vidura said, "You're living in the house of the one you wanted to kill, just like a dog. Just like a dog would live in a house. You're living in the house of Maharaj Yudhisthira, although you tried to kill him. Just see your condition. And he would preach to him. And when that preaching was going on, everybody in the palace was listening. They all came and listened to what Vidura had to say. That is the difference. When Vidura spoke, the whole palace activity stopped and everybody was there listening. We have seen this still. Even today there's some slight vestiges of the Vedic culture. I saw when we were in Sanandana Kingdom, Prabhupada stayed in the king's palace. And the king got down off his throne and put Prabhupada on the throne. Silver, solid silver throne. Very nice, big thing. And then Prabhupada would be preaching and everyone in the whole palace would come and sit there and listen whenever Prabhupada talked. And then when they stopped, then they would get up and go. Otherwise they would not move 1 inch. Because they understood the value of these preachers, of the Vaishnava. They understood. And when the Prabhupada did a program in the city, thousands and thousands of people there, the prince and princess had a big lamp, huge lamp. It was about so big, all stacked up with millions of little lamps. I mean, everywhere, little fires everywhere on this lamp. And they both together held it and offered it to Prabhupada in Artik. Because it was too heavy for any one. So the two of them offered it to Prabhupada in Artik. So this Vedic culture is there. Glorifying. It's like sometimes when Prabhupada would arrive at one of these cities where they understood the value, there would be so many garlands, they would come with garland after garland, and they would just pile up. And then soon they'd come over the top of Prabhupada's head, and we'd have to be taking the garlands off as fast as they would come, just so that they would be, he could breathe. One would come on, we'd pull off, pass it around, pass out the garlands, put off, pull off, pass out. And it would go on for half an hour of just garland after garland after garland after garland. They'd have bands blasting up and down the street in glorification of Prabhupada's arrival. Flags and parades, and that is Vedic culture. When a great personality entered the city, the king would make such a fantastic arrangement that everybody understood something was going on. And they would glorify them. And that person in turn would be so inclined to give them spiritual life. So inclined, it would just bring Krishna right out in that glorification. So this Vedic culture is very nice. And it's all based on good management. Vedic culture based on good management. Because the society is managed nicely, then everything can advance and develop in pure way. And then the people are directed towards Vaishnavas. They're directed towards the Vaishnavas. They're directed towards the preaching. They're directed to come and sit and listen to class. We can conceive of a day when everybody in the whole city comes to Bhagavatam class. Even it's so in Jaipur, even today, everybody comes for Mangalartik. The mayor's there, first one in the door. Everybody's there for Mangalartik. And the people are mad after that deity, Govindaji. Mad! When the curtains open, they all run forward, screaming, Govinda! Radhe Govinda! They're all chanting and dancing in complete ecstasy. Even the mayor. You wouldn't tell him from anyone else. And yet such big managerial responsibilities. All day long we're doing this, doing that. But just serving the deity. He's organizing the deity's city. Whole city, just devotees, nothing else. So, we know there are very good examples. And things actually could get better and better and better. Even people, ordinary people, they may not follow so strictly so many rules, but they have the heart. They want Krishna. In their heart they know, they just want Krishna. And they all work hard in their different respective duties. And when the preaching is going on, they're all ready to listen. Even though when it's discussed about surrender, they may say, oh, yeah, it's very hard, very hard. But they have the knowledge and understanding where they've got to go. There's another way in which the Vaishnava influence expands in a society. Many, many people come who live outside, and this is their place of worship, knowledge, education. And then they become very Krishna conscious. Although gradually and towards the end of life, they realize now it is Krishna is taking all my possibilities of sense gratification away. I must actually surrender. And therefore Prabhupada said he built Vrindavan and Mayapur for those persons to go and surrender at the fag end of their lives. He once told me that this Vrindavan project was meant for the people to come and take shelter, for the Westerners to come and visit, for some to come and serve and preach, and for the old people to come and retire and serve out the last days of their life there and depart from Vrindavan, go back home, back to Godhead. So, we have our old age program too. Security in old age. Actually, so many nice services done by these older persons who are retiring in Mayapur. So valuable service, you cannot imagine. There's one old, I mean really old devotee. So old. Over 70 years old. And he is preaching in all kinds of places. He's such an old man, you can't imagine. But he runs around better than all you young fellows. He's running around so fast you can't imagine. He even went to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which are just practically like savages. Practically there's no culture whatsoever. And the culture never went there. There are places still in India which are so uncivilized you can't imagine. And foreigners are not allowed to visit there for that reason. Because they'll get all the wrong impression. Rightfully. They'll get all the wrong impression. They're called tribals, these people. They're very, very uncivilized. So, he went to all of these places and was preaching like mad and established Nam Hatha centers everywhere. Within 2 months he had 150 devotees. And then he ran off to other places. Then he came back to India and ran off here, ran off there. Preaching like mad. He's completely mad with Lord Chaitanya's mission. Old man, but not old. Somebody once said to Prabhupada, oh, you're such an old man. And Prabhupada said, oh, who has said I am old? Pure devotees never old, whether the body is old or not. Others there are taking responsibility for all the agriculture. Others are taking responsibility for all the printing. Others are taking responsibility for the facilities. Older people are very valuable in a society. They act as the elders when the young people start doing something ridiculous. And the old people, they say, this is wrong, you're going to ruin your life this way. I used to think like that too when I was young, but actually no, it doesn't work. Everybody thinks the young generation that what they're doing is special. And these old people, they have no relationship to it. They don't know that every generation is doing the exact same thing. Maybe they just dress a little differently and they speak a little differently. Like in the mid-60s, there was a certain vocabulary that developed. Nowadays, the vocabulary is completely different. When you use these words that from the mid-60s, everybody thinks you're some dinosaur. So in the 50s there were words, and in the 40s there were words, and in the 20s there were words. 23 skidoo. Whatever these things mean. So they had their funny words. We have our funny words. Someone else had everyone has their funny words. They were rebelling. We were rebelling. They were running around like mad to enjoy senses. We were running around like mad to enjoy senses. What's the difference? Every single generation, it's the same exact thing. But each generation thinks the previous generation, they're all dinosaurs. They don't understand. So a really properly run society has its elders. And the people understand that every generation is the same thing. And these elders help the young to actually overcome a lot of the difficulties and problems which come just simply because you're young. and they give a maturity in a society. Actually, our Krishna conscious society is lacking that right now, due to the fact that it's so young as a society. And therefore there are a lot of problems, I think. If within 40 years from now, when there's a lot of old men in this movement, then the knowledge will be easily passed down, and it will go on very nicely and smoothly. Actually, that's a fact. All of these aspects of the society are very important. The family traditions, the old men, the old ladies, the way in which the leaders are protecting others. Even Grandfather Bhishma said in his organization that the king should have ministers, and all of them should be over 50 years of age and retired from active duty. The ministers should not have that kind of inclination to be doers. They should be a certain group of ministers, not all of them, but just this group which gives advice to the king, like his college of brains. They should be all over the age of 50, already starting to understand that the life is already on the way finished, at the point of renunciation. So, these aspects of culture are essential, actually essential. And they automatically come when Krishna consciousness is expanded. We don't even have to separately endeavor. The whole Varnashram institution, as it engages with the people in the human society, comes automatically by just spreading the chanting of Hare Krishna mantra. Automatically so many people will be attracted. Automatically they will want to do some service, not very much. Automatically they will want to surrender, some more, some less. And therefore we have to engage everybody in Krishna's service, and this creates a large area of influence that Krishna consciousness has, and gradually it expands more and more. And automatically you'll see all these nice things develop. There's no doubt about it. Automatically. So, although Bhagavatam talks about these affairs, don't misunderstand that this is mundane. Not at all. Because when the society is running properly, then all the people in the state can be happy. And when they're happy, the king can be happy. And in such a mutually nourishing society, the demigods also become happy. And the whole face of the earth transforms. When Maharaj Yudhisthira was king, there was no such thing as a bad weather. It would only rain at night. It would come and rain at night, and in the day there would be no clouds. That is a pious king. It was not too cold, it was not too hot. And the cows were so satisfied that their milk bags were so full that they were overflowing with milk everywhere, all over the fields, which was nourishing the fields like anything, because calcium is the number one thing to put on fields. And the whole place was becoming so opulent. The earth was just giving forth grains and fruits and flowers in profusion. The forests were giving forth all kinds of healing herbs and drugs. And the rivers were giving forth all kinds of valuable minerals and stones, and everything was just opulent. That was when Maharaj Yudhisthira was in charge. Afterwards, when some other third-class persons came, many hundreds of years later, it started to degrade. Until we are at the present situation where every leader of state is the worst kind of malecha you can imagine. Eats any garbage, says any garbage, does any garbage, and simply lies all the time to remain in his position, and above all, makes more taxes. Above all. And therefore, things are restricted or wasted or useless, and it's all based on this principle. Therefore, Bhagavatam is right to the point. To organize the society nicely, the king must be right on. So the sages are telling this to Vena. Look, our dear Vena, if you just simply become a little pious and proper, then the whole society will transform, and it will be a wonderful place to live. And the whole human existence will be very nice. And you will enjoy like anything. But now, as you are acting and as you are doing, it will not go on that way. It will fall to pieces at one point in time. So listen to us, Vena. We're telling you the truth. He didn't care. Anyway, we tell the truth. Whether they listen or not, that is another thing. Whether they agree or not, that is another thing. A lusty person will never agree, no matter how much logic you speak. No matter how much logic you speak, they cannot hear. Simply by lust, everything is twisted in their heads. And things which are ordinarily, logically considered to be insane, even become sane if it means we can go on with our lusty desires. This is the material world. Anyway, let us try to become freed from the material world by preaching this Krishna consciousness and becoming Krishna conscious ourselves, and then gradually the whole human society can transform. Our program is not a political program. It's a program of preaching. But automatically the proper political arrangement will take place by the grace of God. All right, Harikesa.